Whichever team is serving is known as a serving team, while the other team is known as a receiving team. For a serve to be legal, the server, standing behind the baseline, must serve the ball cross court and underhand to the adjacent service court on the other side while making contact with the ball below the waist. For a serve to be valid, it must land within the bounds of the adjacent service court. All lines are considered in, except for the non-volley line or the kitchen line. If the ball lands on the non-volley line on the serve is lost. This server will continue to serve as long as he wins the point. In pickleball, you can only score a point when your team is a serving team. When a point is scored, the server number stays the same, but the serving team score will increase by 1. Also, every time a point is scored, the players on the serving team will switch positions, and the same server will serve again. One of the unique things about pickleball is how the score is kept. This is often the most confusing part to someone who is just learning how to play. When keeping score, you must keep track of 3 different numbers that must be spoken aloud before each serve by the server. The first number is the serving team score, the second number is the receiving team score, and the third number is the server number. Each side will always get at least 2 serves, 1 per person, with exception to the very first serve of the game, where the serving team is only guaranteed 1 serve. The first person to serve will be server number 1. Whoever is in the right service court when a side starts to serve will be server number 1, again with the exception to the very first serve of the game, which in this case will be server number 2. So on the first serve of the game, serving from the right service court, the server will call out 0-0-2. Again, 0 for the serving team score, 0 for the second team score or the receiving team score, and 2 for the server number.
What do you think, legal or not? Here it is again in slow motion. You can see I've dropped the paddle head below the ball, which allows me to swing up on it, so that's good. I make contact below my waist, so that's good. Now with these pictures you can't really see the top of the paddle, so you have to take my word for it. It was okay. What do you think, legal or not? This is one of the most common infractions we see. You can see that I'm preparing the paddle above the height of the ball, which means I'm going to have to swing down on it, and that is not allowed. And even though the height of impact is okay, the downward swing is not, so this is an illegal serve.
The serve must be made with an underhand stroke. This first one's pretty easy. When serving, use an underhand stroke. That means the paddle head must be moving in an upward motion of at least 1 degree or more. 0 degrees or a downward motion is not a legal serve. The second element is that contact with the ball must be made below the waist. This is the one that gets a little tricky. There had been some confusion about what exactly constitutes the waist. Now, it doesn't matter how you wear your clothes, the waist is defined as navel level. And the point where the ball hits the paddle must be below the waist. The last element is the position of the paddle head must be lower than the wrist. This one can be the deal breaker. When the paddle head strikes the ball, the highest part of the paddle head must be below where the wrist joint bends. To clarify, the paddle head does not include the handle. Now, all 3 elements must be satisfied in order for the serve to be legal. Upward motion, contact of the ball below the waist with the paddle head below the wrist joint. A volley is when you hit the ball out of the air without letting it bounce first. Most commonly, we volley when we're at the kitchen line, close to the net, and we're pushing through the ball with kind of a half swing or push through the ball. As I mentioned, there are 3 common mistakes that people tend to make when they're volleying. The first is to hit it too hard when the ball comes to you low. When that happens, 3 things can occur. The first is that you hit the ball into the net. The second is that you hit it long. And the third is that you hit it right into your opponent's strike zone and prepare yourself to eat a pickleball. The second common mistake is to allow the ball to get too close to your body. If you allow the ball to get too close to your body, you lose the good angle of being able to hit down on it, and you also give your opponent more time to react. And the third mistake is to allow yourself to get pushed back off of the kitchen line and begin to retreat during a volley exchange, thereby giving your opponents better angles to hit at your feet and more time to react. But to prevent that from happening to you, you need to make sure you hold your ground and do not retreat when you're in a volley exchange.
So the dink shot is that soft shot that just goes over the net and lands in the no volley zone or the kitchen. You really have 2 options. You can hit across to the opponent directly across from you, or you can hit cross court or diagonal. The diagonal shot has 2 big advantages. Well, the big advantage about dinking cross court or diagonal is it allows you to have more area so you can hit the ball shorter, so that your opponent can't jump all over the ball. If you're dinking directly across from you, you have very little space to work with. You have to hit about an 11-foot shot to hit a good dink. If I'm dinking diagonal, I can hit that 11-foot shot or I can hit an 18-foot shot. So a big advantage of dinking cross court, it allows you to hit shorter balls so that your opponent doesn't smash it back at you. Another advantage of dinking cross court is you have a greater margin of error on height, so you can miss a little bit. If you're dinking directly across from you, you have to stay very low over the net. By dinking cross court, I have about another 8 inches that I can work with. If I hit it just a little bit too high, I still have length to work with, so it lands in the no volley zone, so my opponent can't smash it back at me. Sometimes when you visually see something, it makes it way more easier to understand. So I use this to teach people about the length that you have when you dink cross court. It's a golf ball picker-upper, and I've just attached a pickleball at the end, and it telescopes. So now my students can visually see how much more room they have when they dink cross court. So the advantage of this visual aid is that it shows that I don't have very much length to work with if I dink directly across. Whereas if I dink cross court, that's a great dink. And I even have more space to work with, and it's still a very good dink. This visual aid will also show you how dinking directly across too high, you're going to get smashed. But if I dink cross court, the ball's going to have time to drop with the very same height so that my opponent can't smash that shot back at me. So work on your cross court dink. It's actually easier than hitting directly across from you. You'll find that it really improves your game.
lots of things you can do to be a better player, but perhaps the most important one is to be a really great mover around the court. Today, we're going to take a look at some of the things that the top players in the world do in order to be great movers. When it comes to great moving, two of the best movers are Kyle Yates and Jennifer LaCour. Here they are playing at the 2016 US Open. Good moving on the court doesn't consist of standing still with your hands out front, what is traditionally known as the ready position. Instead, it means having a light, athletic, and dynamic look. Notice how many steps Kyle Yates takes in the course of this point. These are not large steps, but instead small adjustment steps. This lets him get perfectly set up to hit the ball as much as possible. Jennifer LaCour is also an exceptional example of great moving on the court. Again, you can see that she's not standing still, but instead has this light, athletic, and dynamic look to her. The little split step on the balls of her feet just before her opponent's hit means that she's prepared to move any direction quickly. Again, look at how many steps LaCour takes in order to get set up for the ball. They're not large steps, but they're small adjustment steps to let her move to the perfect position so she's got a good chance to play the shot exactly how she wants.
Now, while not all of us can move quite as well as Yates or LaCour, what we can control is our desire to move. So let's get away from this idea that we stand still in a quote-unquote ready position, but rather we're light, we're athletic, we're dynamic, we're ready to chase the ball no matter where it might be. That is how you start to play winning pickleball.